Okay, so multitasking. Okay. Give me 2 more minutes and then I will get everybody up to date with everything. Okay, so when you open your virtual machine, just go look for Virtualbox. And on the Virtualbox, you will find the add button, click add. And then here is where you would navigate to your drive and locate that, okay? Okay, so these are done. Okay. Okay, so add your Virtualbox. We make sure that this has it for one more person. So that one has it. Okay. So let me see if I can start my clone. So when you log in, you are going to use MVC 2022. That's the password. And then once you logged in, you are going to find the all apps buttons on the bottom of the desktop. So you're going to click on that and it's going to give you a search bar. Okay. And on that search bar, you are going to search for terminal. This is a command line in Linux, and we are going to use command line for a few things. So I want you to be familiarized with it. I'm almost finished with your drive. Give me,
okay.
yeah, it's here.
But we're not using those flashes.
No, because when we created, we didn't copy the, here's the case for it. Who else need a drive? I think one more person needs a drive. Did you need a drive? Can you pass this back to him, please? And here's the case. All right. So let's talk about the lab. I know, thank you for waiting. Sorry, just trying to get everybody to have the same thing. Okay. So when we created the virtual machine last time, if we didn't copy the VDI, you can act, oh, you need one too. We didn't, let me find one. Okay. If we didn't copy the VDI, it's not going to work. Let me see if I can clone it. Sorry. Hold on 1 second. Let me clone it. Okay. So let's talk. So here we are on the desktop. Let me move my zoom up. You don't have to install update. This takes a while. You can actually do it in terminal by using the command. So you can close that. And to log in, for those of you who missed that, is this password, okay? And then once you're on the desktop, you're gonna click the All App, which are the dots. And then search for terminal. That's how you open up terminal in Ubuntu desktop. Okay. So once you're in, it's gonna look like this, or in your case, you should see like a panda bear or something like that, because it's a different version than, but ultimately I'm using the light and you're using the full version. The clone 3 was the full version that I did for you. Okay. So here's the All App. You're gonna search for terminal. And you're gonna see this. This is the command line in Linux, and you would see similar things with other Debian releases as well, okay? So where are we at right here? We already start up, right? So I want you to start with step 20 on your lab 1. Okay, so I think it's finished the clone. Yes, it did. Where is that? So click the plus button and then locate the VBox file. Okay, so what I did was I took one virtual machine and I cloned it so many times, and some of the clone, I guess, got corrupted, but let's work on this. So we're already at step 20. If once we're logged into the virtual machine and we open up terminal, okay? And then for step 21, we are going to enter a command called uname, okay? And I put the explanation. It says that this command shows the kernel that's being used. And for the kernel in Linux is important. It's always going to be a protected mode. So in some case, you have malware that's impacting the kernel. Yes. It doesn't work for you? Okay, bring it up. Then what you would have is you would need to be able to access it at the level of the kernel. Bring up your drive. So we're going to say uname-a is the command that we can input, and then wait for me, okay? Let me see if I can reclone it on my laptop. Did it say failed drive? System halted? It says that?
Black screen.
At boot? Okay, let's clone another one. I have 8 core on this, so hopefully it is as fast as it can go, you know, but I do have, okay. So when we enter this command, uname-a, right, it's gonna give you the information about the kernel. And that is gonna give you what OS is loaded on it, the type of this information, memory allocation, and processes. Okay, so once you enter the command, you press enter. And as you can see, and I'm sorry, my screen's a little small, right? That it gives you what version of Linux it is, and that's the architecture is your x86, okay? That means that x86 just the 32-bit along with the 64, okay? And then it also tells me that this is the Virtualbox, and it's running Ubuntu, and that's the timestamp, okay? So when do we really need this kind of information? We need this when we check a certain system, or if we do some forensics, sometime that we would need the kernel information. Okay, so let me double check. Let's see if I can re-clone this. Hold on 1 second. Okay, let me just copy it. Users, right? See. Users. Okay, so if you're done with that step, proceed to the next one.
That's where NBC 2022, right?
Mm-hmm. It's so finicky sometimes when you copy virtual machines. All right, thank you for waiting a couple minutes. I'm gonna recopy it and see if it works because I didn't want to clone this. Okay, so once you have this, you can take a screenshot, and on your Windows, if you just press print screen on the top hand side, upper right hand side, and then paste it into a Word document for lab submission, that will be fine. Or you can paste it into your lab document. Okay, so print screen that for me. And then the next step is going to be your D message. Okay, this is gonna give you a way to look at if you're having any kind of error at the startup. Okay, so you are going to type in this whole entire thing. Sudo means it's super user do. And when you log in as a regular user, you want to elevate your privilege to be able to access the system information. You would say sudo and then the message and then that. Okay, so you can say sudo, right? The MSG arrow, and you want it to point to a certain file. So it's under, here's the regular clone. Try the regular clone, okay? I just tested that drive earlier, so it should work. So here, what we want is we want to get the boot log content and we want to dump it out to a log file. Okay. So we're going to do dmsg.log like this. And it's going to prompt you for the password, and we're going to type the same password again. Okay. So once that happens, nothing really shows on your screen because it's really outputting to that log file already, right? So that means that I should have a log file that yes. So it created a .log file. Yes. I'm sorry. Here. Okay. So as I executed that, it created the log file. So I'm at step 23. Now you can also create file by using the cat. So cat is standing for, who knows what cat is? I know he does. What's cat for? If you took my 25, you should know what cat does.
It's
Concatenate is
Yeah.
the name for it, right? So in Linux, we often use cat to really add additional content to the file, okay? And we can also use grep to be able to look at a certain file name that's occurring to the log. Why am I teaching you this? Because your world in cybersecurity is going to be looking at logs, looking at issues with the system and how it boots. Yes, no bootable? Okay. Same issues with the other one. Bring your drive up. I'll copy it for you. Okay, and then wait a few minutes, okay?
All right.
Sorry about that. Okay, so while it's copying, we will continue to talk about the next command. So on step 25, we are going to put in this. And what we're doing is we are going to look at, we're going to look at some error in for, we're going to add some error for that log. Okay, so we're going to do a cat and the file that we created in the last step. And we're going to do a grep command and error. Okay, so that's going to help you with looking at looking at the content of the log and looking at the error log. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and type that in. This one right here. Is it not working still? What? Okay. Log. And the pipe that you will see, it's on top of the enter button on your keyboard. That's called the pipe symbol. And then you are going to put grep error. Oh, did I? Oh yeah, D message log. Thank you. So here it shows me, right, the type of error that could happen during boot. I'm going to try to reclone these. Sorry. Let's hope it won't have any error. Okay, so it should tell you the type of error that you see here. So here we would see that there is a remount error. Okay, and so if you want, you can just state that information. So the whole point in this is to show you how you can look at, right, the log and be able to identify the error. Okay. Then we are going to use step 26 is going to be the ls mod. Yes. Because, yeah, because it's a different VM. So it depends on the system it boots, even though it's the same image that we're using sometimes, right? So sometimes you would have two form of errors or more or one.
So what would be the error, the number or after it says error, the WRM or?
So here it says that for mine, it is a remount error, right? It tells you what error that is, because what we're doing is we're seeking out the error information in the log, what that error could be. Okay. Okay, so this is that. Let me finish cloning this for one of the students. When sometimes we would copy it so many times. Okay, that's how you copy VMs, right? And then even when you copy the folder, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yes, we are.
All right, so next we are going to use the ls mod, and here we are super user do ls mod, and we are going to put it into its own log file. So how you can point to a file that is a log file, you would use a .log extension in Linux, and then you want to use that specific, right, type of file. So here we are gonna use the ls mod, which lists all the loaded mod files within the kernel, because when the system boots, it's gonna pull all of those files. And if anything is modified, we can generate a log and take a look at that, right? So in investigation, sometimes we have to pull the log files from our image of the system, and we want to take a look at that, or we can identify some information. So with that, we would issue the command sudo ls mod and then point it to the file. lsmod.log. Okay, and of course, you're not going to see any kind of notification, right? If it successfully ran, you should see the next line. If you type in you have syntax error where you have a typo, then you have to retype the command correctly. Okay. And this takes practice. So I'm going to give you a couple run through with Linux and then Windows, right? But I encourage you to keep practicing. That's how you're going to get better. Okay. So let me double check the clone. And let me verify, because he's been really patient with me today. Yes, because it's already generated a log. Yes, that's how it's supposed to be. It creates a file, and you can use that command to look at it. Yeah, it's not gonna tell you that it's made it or not. If it shows an error, like it doesn't recognize command, and that you did it wrong. But if you did it right, it's just gonna pop the next line. Just like how mine is. Okay, so we have any other questions regarding that command? So as I did it successfully, it's just gonna go to the next pop-up, right? So that means that it went. Now, if you type in an error, it's gonna say command not recognized, or it doesn't understand your command and options. Then you have to retype it again. So now, once we have that, so the whole point in these three steps is for you to make a log file, right? Generate a log file from the system and then go and look at it using a cat command. And what cat command does is it's going to let you identify a specific area of that log file so you can see. right? So in the case, if we suspect something weird happening to our kernel, like we have a rootkit, we can go in and take a look at our kernel and then identify what kind of errors that rootkit occurs, right, generated. So that's the whole point in these exercises, to show you how you can make a log file and then go in and look at the log file in specific things. So in the next step, after we made the ls mod log, we are going to cat it, okay? So here it tells you that you can look at the drivers file that's loaded to see what driver and modification has been loaded. So all of the hardware devices need some form of driver, right? And firmware to work. So after we generate that, we are going to cat and grep it. So here we're going to look for an HDA, which means it's a hard drive, right? So if you suspect that it could be impacting the first internal hard drive, you do an HDA. Okay. So with that, we will do a cat lsmod.log. And then we're going to pipe it with the grep. And then we're going to do an HDA. So that's the password for those of you who just got in. Okay. Now, be familiar with terminal, because when you work with Linux server, that's all you see, right? That's all you need, really. Linux is beautiful in that you can control everything in terminal, where in Windows, in some cases, you have to get out of command prompt and use shell. Is it hot in here? It's hot in here for me. Yeah, I turned the AC on. I think the AC is broken in this room. It's so hot in here.
It's giving me a low storage for it.
How's that? Okay.
Maybe
Good.
I'm
All right.
just
I'm
gonna
so
wait.
sorry.
Just giving me a storage for it. Okay. What happened? Oh.
We have multiple cold,
That's
but
oh,
it's
that's
gonna
fine.
get cool when
Oh,
you get
well,
sleepy.
the other one was created.
That's usually what happens.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the next one, so you know what to do. Okay, so after you have done that, take a screenshot for me, right? To know, so I know that you did it successfully. Then what if you want to look at a USB log, right? So now USB is it's a critical area for us, because people plug things in, they introduce malware to our system. They can also steal your file, right? Using USB. That's why most of the time companies will disable the USB in the front. But we can also identify all the USB devices in our system this way. We can do a sudo ls stand for list USB, and we're going to generate that to the log. So how is this convenient for me? What if you have thousands of systems and you need to take a look at those USB? You can automate this, right? So I would do a sudo ls, right? USB, and I want to generate that to a ls usb.log. Okay, so that worked. It created a log file containing all my USB devices. And every system, keep in mind that it's different, right? Yours might have more plugged in. Other people might not have less things plugged in. Yes.
Can we go back?
Okay. This one.
Okay, so you didn't answer it, I know, but what's the cat ls log?
Mm-hmm.
So when I enter that, I get like word, then I get the numbers, then I get.
Yeah, because you have an internal hard disk drive. Whereas,
What am I looking at?
yeah, so what you're looking at is you're looking at a log file for ls mod, and we talked about ls mod, right? So when you generated that file, when you grep it, you can identify a certain things, and HDA is for your hard disk A. So that would be your first hard disk in the system, right? So it would be mounted for a purpose of OS reasons. And so you can look at other type of hard disks. Yes, right. So it won't generate much for when you grep the HDA, but if in the case when we can look at other hard disk drive, right, it might generate something. So on yours, it might shows a little bit different compared to others. So here, right, it talks about how we would use the driver to load your hard disk, right? HDA is a hard disk, okay? We talked about USB, how we generate a list of USB. Now we can go in and we can see it by doing a cat lsusb.log, okay? So we would then do a cat. Once you make a file, you can see it now, right? Okay. So yours might be different where you would have more USB connected than mine, or it might list 4, 5, 3, 2, 1, etc. Okay.
Mine, it says no such file or directory, but I have the USB in the
Did you sudo ls USB?
.log.
You have to point it to the dot. So if there's no file, that means you didn't create a file. You have to create a file to see it, right? And when you cat it, basically it goes to that file and it's going to pull the information for you. So once you make so I can go back and I can do this, right? See how long it is when we don't grep it? It could be thousands of lines. If let's say it's a server and it has a ton of stuff, if you don't grep it, you can't identify the specific, it's just going to give you a bunch of things, right? So grep allows us to really narrow down on specifics. So any log file, you can go in and you can cat it, right? From the beginning. Once you generate that file, it stores that information for you. Okay, so I was at the last one, and you can up arrow to change to the previous command if you wanted to run it again, and you keep going up and it's going to go to the prior and the prior and so on, right? Like this. All right, that's how command line works for most part. Now we're going to look at the network side. We're going to do an IP address. So if textbook tells you to do ifconfig, that's dated, okay? ifconfig needs the network packages to be installed, and most Debian releases does not support ifconfig anymore. Everybody moves over to IP address, and it works the same thing with Mac OS. Okay, because Mac OS terminal looks very close to this, Unix in the back. Okay, so you would have, we're now going to make our IP addresses and we're going to put it into a file called .log file, right? So we can do IP address to Word. Okay. And then we are going to point it to IP address.log. Like this. Now you can see it, right? Once you make that log file, how do I see it? Cat and the file name. Okay. Question? Yes. Okay. You name space -a. Make sure that the option like that. And you should see like a couple lines, it should tell you Linux, GNU, yeah. Okay, other questions? Okay, so now once we made the IP address.log, right? We can cat into it, but we're only interested in the INET, which is the actual IP address, because it's going to give you like the default gateway, right? All the other stuff that's affiliated, the subnet mask, and so on. So now when we access it, can I just do this? Yeah, it's going to display by just doing an IP address, but I'm going to get a bunch of stuff. But if you want to generate it to a file, you would then point it to a .log file like that. Okay. Why do I need to make it into a file? Because when you build evidence or when you put files together to make a portfolio for that particular investigation, right, you have the file. Okay. Okay. So now, once I do that, I'm going to go ahead and do a cat IP address .log. And I'm going to grep it for inet. Pipe grep inet. So here it tells me a few things, and I want you to know what you're looking at because, you know, yeah, you can complete the loud, done and dandy, it's great. But we want to understand what we're looking at. Okay? So the first address that you see on there, 127.0.0.1/8, that's called a loop back address. Okay. That means that the system always sees itself. Okay. And you know, you ever see t-shirt that says, you know, 127.0.0 home, you know, home sweet home or something like that. System always calls home. So it sees itself as an entity. I call this a boomerang address. That means that it goes out to the network, it's going to come right back to that system. So whatever that address is, you see that's going to loop back to that existing system that's connected to your system, your local host. Okay. Then the second address that you see there, right? This is going to be your scope of the host. And this is for version 6. INET 6 is version 6 IP address. When you see regular INET, that's an IP4, version 4. Okay. So on the next address, that's a version 4. And that's my actual IP address for my machine is the 10.0.x.x. Okay. So it stores it on the file. Then the version 6 of the IP address is following. Okay. Because they're using both here in this network. And this is, and that /24, all that is just indicating the network identifier. And if you want to find out more, take my 48. Okay, next semester, you need to do that network plus. And this means that the first 8-bit is identifying that network for the 127. The /24 indicates that the first 3 octet, 24 bits, okay, it's a that identified that network. So how does the switch know what system is asking? It's using that to identify what segment of the network. It's kind of like you drive down the big freeway and when you exit, right, that's where the switch is. It's going to take you to your home. So the router brings you to the freeway, which is your main network, right? It interfaces one network to the other. That's how your internet traffic works. So when you request a website, it gets you to the router. Your home router acts as a switch as well. It brings you to the actual system. Okay, so the switch actually takes it to the segment. Question. Okay, so we saw how address looked like. Okay. So now you can answer. So for me, I have 4 addresses, right? And so you just answer that question. What is the IP version 4 address of the system? So when you look at this, you should have a scope local dynamic. And it's dynamically obtaining an IP address from the server. Okay. So for yours, it's a little bit different than mine, right? But we're on the same network. So I would be a 10 dot to put down the IP address. This /24 just indicate the mask for the network, the subnet mask. Okay, so put down the information. Then now we're gonna play with, yes. Yeah. So mine was 10.0, what was it? 8. So this one. 0.2.15. Now, how can it distinguish between your virtual machine and your computer that you're sitting at? So when you create your virtual machine, what it does, it creates a virtual network interface card. That's why when you look at your configuration, it will say that it is a VBox NIC, right? And it treats it like a real entity in that network. Okay, depending on your setting on your VirtualBox, but what it does is it treats it as a completely different system, like the one next to it. Okay. Now you can bridge it with your regular computer where it will be sharing the same resources. You can also do that by changing the configuration on VirtualBox. Yes. So where's your virtual computer? Yeah, so you just have to remap there. Yep. Yeah, that's fine. What it does is it takes up the space on your Mac. No.
Oh, it's funny. This one says CIS27, but it says CD 25. And I was like, I looked at it, I was like,
Plug it in.
yeah, you said me directory 27. I'm like, why would we CD into a
Oh, yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah, it's the same. Because when you log on to all the regular user, and whenever it does things at the local level,
It's all
it's always gonna want something. And then paste it onto your document. All right. So we already did this, right? Next, we are going to make a folder, and make there is the same in Windows as in Linux, right? So only Microsoft calls their folder. Almost all the other systems, we refer to the folder as directories, okay? So what we can do is we are going to use the command called, we are going to actually first move into our desktop area by doing a CD desktop. So you're going to do a CD desktop with a capital D. And as you see that when you move into that folder, it shows that in blue. So that means that we're opening that folder now, right? So CD stands for change directory, and that's the same thing in Microsoft as in Linux. Then on the next one, we are going to, so here I am at step 34, right? We are going to make a directory called CIS27 inside on our desktop. So make there CIS27. Okay, but we haven't moved into it yet, right? We've just made a folder on the desktop called CIS27. Then we are going to now move into it. Sorry, I didn't change this. I used some of the stuff that I did for 25. I always feel like my students need to know more Linux. So you are going to do a CD CIS27. Once you made that folder called CIS27, you're now going to change directory. You're going to move into it. Okay, and you should now see the path get extended with the blue, and it shows that you are now inside that folder. I gotta put in the ticket for the AC to be fixed. Okay, next, there are several ways that we can make files in Linux. We can do a touch command. We can also do an echo. There are many ways to do this. So first, we're gonna do a touch command. And when you touch, what you can do is you can make a bunch of files, okay? So when I teach programming and when they're trying to learn how to write script to automate this, right? So when you program, what it does, it uses the library and it's gonna instruct at the low level using the system command, which is like touch, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna touch file1.txt and file2.txt. You gotta give it a file extension so that way it can create the proper file, okay?
Sorry, what was the password again?
txt and then file2.txt, like that. So how do I know? You can go to the graphical user interface, open up that folder on your desktop. You should see the files there. It's blank, right? Because we didn't append anything. Okay. So now what we're gonna do is we are going to install a text editor called Nano. Some of you took my programming class, you probably learned this, but anytime that you install anything in Linux in terminal, you do a sudo apt-get install if it's Debian based, right? Like Raspberry Pi, Ubuntu, Kali. So we would then do sudo apt-get install Nano. So what we're doing is we're installing the Nano app, right, on our Linux system. And then of course it's going to ask for the password, MVC with the capital M 2022. Okay. So you can bring in any application by doing sudo apt-get install. And it's slightly different between Debian and other releases like SUSE, Red Hat, right, with the command. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we are going to use the Nano File Txt. So once we have the app, we're gonna use it to edit our file. So when I do a Nano text file1.txt, I'm entering the editor to edit that file now, right? It's like opening up Notepad and then, you know, or opening up that file and then use Notepad to edit it, to write to it. So we're gonna write something in there. So here we are going to put in, this is test1. Okay, so this is test1, like this. And then you're gonna do a Control X to exit and then yes to save. Once I have the sentence that I need, Control X on the keyboard, and it's gonna ask you to save, you're gonna say yes by pressing Y. And that saves it to the file that you made. Okay? Control X, it says it on step 40. And then press Y and enter to save. Then you're gonna do the same thing for file2.txt. So we're gonna do nano file2.txt and then put in the string. So here, once I press enter to save, I'm gonna do nano file2.txt, and you can edit files all day this way, right? So it saves you 5 clicks. Okay, you gotta go to the folder, open up the folder, open up the file, open up the app, edit it, right? The beautiful thing about terminal and Linux is you can do it all in one place. That's what I'm trying to teach you. Okay, so this is test 2, let's say. Then we are going to save it, Control X, yes, enter. Now, once we have it, we want to see it, right? What's the point of writing it if we're not able to cat into it? So we can see it in terminal by using a cat command. So we could do cat file1.txt, and it tells you the content of it. Huh? And as you do more, you're like, oh, this is what command I use, right? So I encourage you, now you know how to make a virtual machine, to boot it, to access the terminal, to write files, to put log file, right? And that can also be taught in operating system class, but in security, we use OSs a lot. We examine OSs a lot, so it's important to know how. All right, then we are going to do the same thing for text too. So we're going to do cat file2.txt before we screenshot. So I should see the content for both. Question. Now, if you have a very large file, just keep in mind that it's going to drop down a lot, and then you can type grep and then put in, the criteria that you want to search. Okay. So I'm going to tell you that, there are tons of Windows people. I was certified with Microsoft 2000, right? Server 2000. I eventually learned all the later versions, but Linux administrators, they're far few. Okay, so, and most web servers run Linux servers. So it's always good to practice on Linux. And in your field, right, we use Linux machines to test things like Kali and other OSs. So it's always good to learn how to use it well. Okay, all right. Okay, so now once we are done with our files and showing the content of our file, we're going to use the list command, or the ls. And so here we can do a list, and it should give you the two files that you created, right? So when I get back one level, it's going to give me the folders and the file, and then you can move back by changing your directory. So I should have two files here, right? File 1 and file 2 .txt, and take a screenshot. Now, let's say that you need to make a copy of those files, okay? Forensic, you don't tamper with the file. We always make a copy of the image and use that image to make copies of stuff. Because if you modify, as soon as you open the file, it changes to timestamp, and that is dismissed in court. So we can move files by doing a CP where you can make a copy, okay? So here now we are going to make a copy, and we're going to put it into the temp folder. So CP file 1.txt, file 2.txt, and if you have more files, you can just keep on going, right? And then you want to point it to the path of your other folder. So in Linux, there's a TMP. So it copy what files I created and then put it into the temp folder. So for the next, so when you go today, I want you to put your name on your drive case, so that way you can come back to it next week. Okay, on Wednesday, unfortunately, I have to cover the concept when we talked about protocol. We're gonna do a little bit of Wireshark, but I want to expand on Linux. So I want to show you how you can control permissions, as we talked about that last week, using command line. Okay, next time. So that way, and then we'll move, after a few labs in Linux, we'll move to Windows, and we'll do more on the server side. Okay, all right. Any question as far as copying go? So when you copy like this, keep in mind that it's going to inherit whatever the temp permission would be. So if you have like full control on the directory that it was, and then you copy it and you put it onto the other one, it's going to inherit whatever the parent folder is. Okay. So now do you see the files that you have copied? Okay. So how do I be able to go do that? Well, you can go into this and you can look. Okay. So on the desktop level, did I put a note for you guys to do something there? Okay, so you can change the directory to temp. So let's do that on the terminal. Sorry. Yeah, I know. Where
You
did
gotta
it?
wait for the animation.
Did I close my terminal?
No, just go down the bottom.
Yeah, there it is. Always search for everything. All right, CD TMP. And then you can do an LS to list. Right? As you see that temp has more content in it. So I saw my file. So you can put yes there. I put 3, but I think we only made 2. So
No, yeah, we gotta make
yeah. If you did the 3, you should see 3. That's fine. More practice. Good. Okay. So what I did there was I changed the directory into temp, and then I did an ls command to list it. Right? So I should see it, take a screenshot. Then if you don't have the file 3, you can use file 2. So we are going to use the ls command, and what we want to do is we want to look at the permission. So it's like in Windows, you right click the file and you go to properties and you look at the security tab. That's what we're doing in Linux right now, right? So we are going to do an LSL -L, and then we're going to do file. I'm going to do file2.txt. Okay. So as you look at the permission, I want you to kind of see what it means, right? So it says R, it stands for read, W stands for write. And when you write, you're able to modify it and also delete. So it has read, write, and based on this, right, this is the user account that we're on, CIS27, and then CIS27. So this group of rights is for this is for this. And Linux also use numerical value to indicate permissions or letters like this. Okay, so there's read, write, read, and then read, write for the first level. Okay, so it asks you, okay, what are the owner permissions? So I have read and R and W, and then the group permission is right next to it, right here. RWR. So I put a little explanation for the flags for the permission so you can see what that looks like. Okay. And if it's dashes, it just means a file cannot be changed or modified. W just, that means that it can be changed. Okay. So at that permission level, if you see a dash, that means that it's not configured to be able to apply the existing permission. So you can look at the details with that table there. Okay. We're almost done. We have like 15 minutes. That should take care of the rest. So now what we're going to do is we are going to change the permission of your file, and you can use file2.txt if you don't have the third one. So to change permission, we are going to use a Chmod, and that is just how we would be able to modify the file. Okay, so we would change the permission to make it read only for the group and not give them write, because remember it has RW originally. So we are going to issue the command chmod, and equal, and then G equal R. So group is read, and then the file name, file2.txt. So you always want to follow chmod command with the level of permission, right? Like we're changing the group permission to make it read only. And then the file name. If it doesn't throw any error, that means you type everything correctly and understood your command, and we're good. So that's how you change permission at the file level for the group. Now, keep in mind that the user are always going to be part of the group, so it's better just to change the group permission instead of the user permission, unless there's specific needs. Okay, so I normally control everything with group membership, even in Windows, compare also in Linux too, right? So it's better just to limit their permission with the group. And then to go back home, like get out of those folder, I want you to do CD, and it takes you back to the previous of the home. Okay, so follow the steps here. And then to shut down for Ubuntu, you just do shut down now. That just activate the power button. In Red Hat, you have to do shutdown -0, I believe. Some releases, you have to tell it. So what if you just type in shutdown and not now, it counts down 60 seconds before it shuts down. But if you say now, the value for the minutes is 0 out compared to Red Hat, right? It shuts down immediately. Whoop. It helps if I type it correctly. There you go. And then once you do that, you close out your Ubuntu. Make sure that we eject the drive. Okay. I'll put a pen on here or two. When you use a case, if you don't have a case, there's some empty case up here. Put your name on it. Questions? Lost? Not sure? Yes. Okay, go to for your Virtualbox, go to see if you have a flash drive. It's a puppet. Settings. And then go to USB. Add. And then find the flash drive. Probably easier. Should I do just crowd it. Go there's a browser. Firefox right there. Yeah, I gotta play around with it to see if it mounts your drive. Because even if you configure it in Virtualbox, you have to mount it in Linux. Otherwise, it doesn't see it as a drive. Yeah. Okay, how are we doing? Anybody have any questions or you having a hard time with what you said? So the first set is the user permission, and the next one is that's the user, which is your CIS27. It shows you that here. This belongs to this, and this belongs to this. So when you remove, it just push out the dash. That means that it's not. Yeah, so but if you give it a different permission, we'll just add the letter. You can do it with the letter, you can do it with the value. some snacks up front.
Turn it off.
Corn nuts and candy today. Let me stop recording.
We're trying to go along.